pretty close.
Monday, it's February 6th at 7:30 p.m. and this is the City of Brainerd. City Council Administrator Bergen, would you please call the roll?
Terry. Stengline.
Here.
Johnson. Chesak.
Here.
O'Day. Stunek.
Here.
Bevins.
Here.
And Bedot.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I almost caught that one.
All right. Let me get this thing to scroll.
Stressful.
It's not going to happen. There we go. Excuse me, I'm having computer issues. Next up is item 4, the approval of the agenda. As you all see in front of you, I had a request to put an agenda item on this evening. I did not put it on. It is a request from Vicki Kinney on the My Neighbor to Love Coalition on a letter of support. Anybody want to see this on tonight's agenda? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Motion by.
Second.
Motion by the chief, second by Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 5 is a consent calendar where notice to the public, all matters are listed are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the council votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So,
Motion by O'Day, second by Stengline. Any discussion? Hearing none, Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Terry. Stengline.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Chesak.
Yes.
O'Day.
Yes.
Stunek.
Yes.
And Bevins.
Yes, that resolution is adopted. Next up is 8 gads. We're having problems with the computer today. I know. Right. Let's use that. Next up is item J, authorizing staff to begin hiring process for line worker vacancy. Is that right? No.
in consent.
Oh, that's in consent. I don't know what I'm doing.
You want personnel and finance to take over?
Council committee reports. 6A, Personal and Finance Committee, Chairman Gabe Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 6 items on the agenda tonight. I'm in all disarray here too, Stunek. All right. The first of which is to approve an MOA between the IBEW, the city, and the Steelworkers Union for employees to assist at the hydro dam. And the motion is to approve the MOU between the city of Brainerd, the USW local number 9230 Unit 09 Union, and the IBEW Local 31 Union representing the public utilities employees that allows IBEW employees to assist at the hydro dam facility as needed, further to authorize the signature of city administrator on said MOU, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, second by Stunek. Any discussion? Chairman Johnson.
It's pretty clear that we're gonna let IBEW employees work in steelworker jobs, and the bigger reason is we have a few retirements on the horizon. We have one coming up shortly, but a few more on the horizon in the steelworkers. So now is probably the right time to what's it called? Automate all of the work done out at the dam. So as we may do it as the steelworkers retire, we have the IBEW workers filling in at the dam, and eventually it'll just be automated over there. That's the goal.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next up is to approve an MOA to adjust the wage grid step placement for Ally Timmons. And the motion is to approve the MOA between the city of Brainerd and the IBEW local number 31 union representing the administrative support employees, adjusting the wage grid step placement for police records management technician Allison Timmons to step 4 effective January 1st, further to authorize the signatures of proper city officials, and I so move.
Motion by Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Terry. Any discussion?
I have something I'd like to add, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chesak.
President. I want to thank the staff for responding to my question in such detail. It was very good background, and I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is to ratify the hiring of another James Reed, for the senior engineering tech. And the motion is to ratify the hiring of James Reed effective February 15th, 2023. Further, that he be placed on step 4 of the senior engineering tech project coordinator wage grid at $31.14 per hour. And I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, a second by Stunek. Any discussion? Chairman Johnson.
This was formerly the just engineering tech position. We had posted a couple times and weren't getting qualified applications. We reposted as a senior engineering tech with a little bit more pay. We did get 2 applications, and they think James Reed will be an excellent fit in the organization, so we're excited.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Next up is ratify the hiring of 2023 police intern, and the motion is to ratify the hiring of Richard Berry as our 2023 spring police intern effective February 2nd, 2023 at $16 per hour, and I so move.
We have a motion by Johnson. Looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Terry. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next up is to approve the final payment of the Police Department cold storage building. And the motion out of committee is to recommend approval of the final payment to Lind Masonry and Construction in the amount of $5,100, and I so move.
Second.
Motion by Johnson, second by Stunek. Any discussion? Chairman Johnson.
If any of you have forgotten, I'll be happy to remind you. This is the cold storage building that 2 years ago we were told in a million years we'll never need something like that. Is just, we'll never need it. It would be ridiculous to even think that we would need a cold storage facility out at that property. Well, then last year we did need one, and it was going to be $200,000. So the good news is we came in at $195,456. So depending on how you look at it, we were either $10,000 under budget or $195,000 over budget. But either way, the project is done.
And it's got doors and roof, you forgot
Thank-
that.
It has all of the components a building usually has, so it's got that going for it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
All right, please continue.
All right, thank you. And then the final item we had is the annual review of the investment policy. And the motion out of committee was to approve the policy as presented, and I so move.
Second.
Motion by Johnson, second by Terry. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Please continue.
All right, end of report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up is Safety and Public Works Committee Chairman Mike O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had 5 items on safety and public works tonight. First of which was a resolution to approve a letter of support for the RAISE grant application. Motion coming out of committee was to approve the letter of support and adoption of the resolution supporting MnDOT's RAISE grant application, and I so move.
We have a motion by O'Day. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Stingline. Any discussion? Chairman O'Day.
This is a letter in regard to federal funds that MnDOT wants to pursue. This is just our backing for MnDOT, saying that we support more money from the federal government for our 210 project.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion.
Resolution, Mr. Chair.
This is a resolution.
It is.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Terry.
Yes.
Stingline.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Chesak. O'Day.
Yes.
Stunek. And Bevins.
Yes, that resolution is adopted. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next item on our list was the discussion on alternative proposal for the 2023-2024 downtown snow removal district. We did not have a motion on this item. We just had a long discussion about when this comes up every year. As most of us know, downtown, some of the business owners really want to continue our special services district. Some of them think that it's too expensive and they don't want to continue to pay for it. So we're always looking for alternatives on how to be more efficient and more cost-effective in snow removal. Mr. Dean and staff came up with a recommendation of of hiring one extra staff to take care of sidewalks on all snowfalls in the downtown area, and getting away from bidding out the special services. There's pros and cons to doing it this way. It wouldn't be quite as efficient on the streets, but the sidewalks would always be much cleaner. Reason we didn't move forward with this, we wanted to have staff reach out to the businesses on 210 to see if they are willing or wanting to be part of that special services district specifically for snow removal on the sidewalks. I believe what it came down to was about $47 per business on average. Was that what we had for the sidewalk snow removal part?
Yeah, it would be around $50 per season for about a 50-foot frontage, and that's based on the downtown district.
So staff is going to reach out, see what the general consensus is for that going forward. Hiring this person wouldn't just be hiring this person around an $80,000 a year cost. It would also include purchasing some equipment, specifically a tractor with a broom that would be able to fit everywhere it needs to go downtown, because our current broom goes the dynamite does not fit in our downtown sidewalks everywhere. So we can come up with a new name if we do end up going that route, as we will eventually. This person will also work on the downtown gardens in the summer, as well as some other park upkeep work as well. So it wouldn't just be a seasonal. But that is where we left it.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
may I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the street and snow removal in the street disappears. We just do it as our regular routes, not prioritizing downtown, or yes, prioritizing downtown?
We would do it similar to the other corridors nearby downtown, like South 8th, Maple.
Okay. So
We would
it'd
do
be
it around
when
the same time.
when it comes up. And the second question I have is, on the sidewalk snow removal, why the 75% reduction? What makes it from 206 this year to 407 or 47 with a 75% reduction? What would change?
Not hiring it out through Tom's Backhoe. That was the current practice is based on the latest bid, and I just put a scenario with a certain amount of snowfall events. The reduction is having just one staff person do the entirety of downtown, and I put some thought into how many hours that they would have to spend to do that entire downtown district, and then figuring it out split out. Now, again, that doesn't include streets, and we would have to also maintain the parking lots, which they are also getting assessed for currently. So that's where the reduction is mostly just one staff person going through the entirety of downtown.
Okay. It seems unrealistic to me to be a 75% reduction, especially since you have to pay wages and health benefits and all that stuff that we pay as employees.
I agree.
But, okay. Any other discussion on this issue, Chairman Johnson?
I just want to piggyback on your idea there. That $47 is just for the time the employee would spend removing snow on the sidewalks. This would be a full-time equivalent that we would have to pay full-time year-round. So it would be more expensive than our current outsourced contract, because we'd be paying him 2,080 hours a year.
Yes.
What I was thinking.
That is-
Chairman O'Day.
That is correct. I think it was estimated that the downtown businesses would pay about $11,000 out of the snow removal total.
Between everything, it would be somewhere in the realm of about 11,000 of their salary.
So if you were to take the downtown 11,000, it might be somewhere similar to that if you added in the 210 businesses to chip in for this person. So maybe double that. And then if you're putting the budget of downtown gardening, which is around 15,000 towards this person, that would get you upwards of about half of what this person would cost us as a city.
Okay,
Mr. Chair or Mr. President, I'm not sure.
I'm going to recognize the mayor next, and then you, Mr. Chesak.
I just have a question about where does this employee fall? Because if we're talking parks, we're talking about two completely different departments. Even though it is still public works, parks is a completely different budget. And I know that the council has the right to declare whatever it wants for the Parks Department to go take care of, i.e. boulevards. But it seems like you're crossing a lot of barriers here, where you're talking about snow removal in the downtown, and then also talking about beautification and potentially using it as a parks employee as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chesak.
I don't know if this was mentioned, in case of more information, that this person, if hired, would take care of any snow amount, not just that 4 inches that the current contractor takes care of, so that's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Any other comments on the downtown special assessments? Okay, thank you. I hope staff heard all that stuff, and we'll continue, Mr. O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next item was another discussion on the updated street lighting policy. Went through a lot of different pricing changes that have happened since last year. Obviously, these lights have gotten more expensive, just like anything else. What the discussion really came down to was, do we want to add banners? And do we want to add outlets on each one of these poles? Adding banners alone brings the cost of these up by over $1,100, almost $1,200 per pole, because you have to use a bigger pole for our banners that apparently are like sails. But the last ones weren't. If we stuck with those size banners, I think we'd be fine. But nevertheless, if we're gonna put banners on these, or if we're gonna put banners on some of them, what we asked staff to do is come up with some options on, do we need banners anywhere? Do we need banners in some places, like coming and going to and from town, or maybe our central business district, things like that. We want options A, B, and C, just to specifically come up with a plan on how these are going to be distributed and what we want to actually spend on these things. We did have a motion coming out of committee to recommend that staff goes ahead and purchases the residential poles and fixtures that we were approved on our previous meeting. And so for that, I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Chesak. Any discussion on that? On purchasing the residential poles? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you moving off of lights? Because I have a comment on lights.
Oh, you're the president.
Yeah, I understand.
ahead.
But it's your committee. My thoughts are, the only poles that would need electrical are already in place in their downtown. I would not buy electrical anywhere else. Secondly, if MnDOT will allow certain poles to go up on 210, since that project is coming up within a year or so, I would consider purchasing the larger poles for some number of poles on 210 Washington and nowhere else. Because the poles on South 6th Street are brand new. They were just put up less than 2 years ago, and MnDOT picked them, and I don't know if they hold any banners or not. They never told me that. Little ones, small sales.
I was going
And
to,
I don't think I need banners on Holly Street in front of my house. So therefore, 210 would be where I would consider it. Two reasons. One is that project is getting done if MnDOT will allow, and that's where everybody's gonna see them. You don't have to buy them for every pole, but maybe every third pole or something like that. So,
we did have a motion from PNF last year about this time on how we're going to distribute those poles. And if there are going to be changes, which it sounds like there are going to be changes, just based on how much the prices have gone up and all the different details that we need to hash out, I would suggest that we send that back once we make this decision on when and where we're going to distribute these poles, when they're gonna go up. Just to re-ask that question, see if it has changed.
any other comments on lights? Go ahead, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4 was a review of the draft ordinance for amendment for section 320 on the administrative citations. As we know, this is the first year of going through the citation process, bringing it to Safety and Public Works. What we found is that there's a lot of common offenses, mainly garbage, grass, what did we have? Dog feces and snow on the sidewalks. So what we're moving towards now is, instead of having every single one of those come towards, come to SPW for a recommendation, we are just changing the ordinance so that staff can go ahead and take care of those. It speeds up the process, and instead of having to wait 30 days for somebody's grass to be mowed when they're never going to mow it, Staff can now get it done in 10 days. So it's kind of back to where we were before, but we're also going to ask that any of these abatement situations that do come up, we still add them in the packet so that council is aware of certain properties. So coming out of committee, recommendation was to approve the draft ordinance as presented and for staff to bring it, the ordinance as a first reading to the next city council meeting. I so move.
I have a motion by O'Day.
Second.
Second by Stengline. Any discussion? Chairman Johnson.
I'll be voting no because we're back into section 320, but we still don't have an upper limit on what a citizen could be fined in any given year for one single violation. It used to be at $1,000. We removed that. I didn't like it. So since we're not adding a ceiling of the max fine a citizen can receive, I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chairman O'Day.
The max was $2,000. What we've moved towards is when we get to the $300 citation, usually move to abatement if it's abatable. We move towards a $300 per month citation through November. So we don't even get close to that $2,000 mark that we used to get towards.
So let's put a max of 2,000 in there.
I don't think it's necessary. I think if there's something that does come up that costs the city more than $2,000, I think we should be able to assess that to the person.
Okay, everybody will get a vote, I promise.
It's just discussion.
I know. Thank you for your discussion, both of you. I appreciate it. Any other discussion on this motion? Hearing none, this is just to send it back to staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
That motion carries. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last item on our list tonight was just a direction on active code enforcement cases. This has to do with 1306 Oak Street. They've gone through the 3 citations, have had no communication with staff. If you can pull up the picture, Sean, the sidewalk has snow that hasn't been shoveled this entire winter, and now there's a big branch in the middle that hasn't been picked up either. And we've had complaints, and we're gonna send some machinery in to hopefully tear that up from the concrete somehow and pour down some salt and clean that sidewalk up, and that will be assessed to the property owner. And that is staff's recommendation, and I so move.
Motion by O'Day, second by Chesak. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Please proceed.
End of report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 7 is unfinished business. Item 7A is some committee resignations. Mr. Yeager, you're up on these Charter Commission and Parking Commission. You want me to hold off?
That'd be excellent, Mr. Chair.
All right. Item 7A is been removed at the Commissioner's request. Item 7A is Riley Weber. Yes.
Mr. President, may I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm confused. Was that a resignation or the term has expired, so by default that Mr. Yeager is no longer?
It's called resignations on the
It is.
packet.
So there isn't a resignation? Is that
He
what
just requested that we hold off.
I wasn't clear. Thank you.
Yep, good question. Thank you. Item 7A, number 2 is Riley Weber from the Parking Committee. Is there a motion to accept that resignation with regret?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Chesak, second by O'Day. Any discussion? Mr. Mayor?
I just want to say thank you to Riley for the work that she did on the Parking Commission. She did a great job. Really appreciated working with her.
Thank you. Item 7B is a call for applicants. Mr. Mayor, you're up first.
Ladies and gentlemen, the following applications are available at our website, www.ci.brainerd.mn.us/boards. I've got some recommendations here that are available. The following committees have seats, but I want to say something super fast, that there are no limitations to how many boards you can be on. So if you want to put in some applications, put in some applications. You want to put in some more applications, put in some more applications. There is a process. The applications come in, we review those. There are some that I make recommendations for. There are some that the council president makes recommendations for. Those recommendations go to the council. The council then selects those individuals. That's the process. Just make sure we're all clear on that.
We got to vote on Riley Weber's resignation.
I apologize.
No, I apologize.
Slow me down.
We had a motion by Chesak, a second by O'Day to accept Riley Weber's resignation with regret. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't usually vote, but I also say aye. Now, to get back to the process, you send in an application, recommendations are made, council votes. Council selects these individuals. Those individuals serve on those committees. We want to thank all those individuals for doing so. But I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that there is a process. All right, the following commissions have seats available. Charter Commission, 2 terms expiring 2026, 2 terms expiring 2025, 1 term expiring 2023. Rental Dwelling License Board of Appeals, 5 terms expiring 2024. HRA, 1 term expiring 2027, and TAC, 1 term expiring 2023. We also have 2 terms on the EDA, 1 term expiring 2028 and 1 term expiring 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as council president, I've got a term or 2 on the Parking Commission expiring in 2026 and 1 on the Planning Commission expiring 2025. New business, item 8A, is the first reading of proposed ordinance 1542, amending section 1200 of the city code, sale and consumption of liquor in public parks. So this is brought to us by Public Works Director Dean. Anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I'd just like to clarify a couple pieces. So again, this was discussed at the Park Board as part of the December discussion on the new amphitheater, developing the policies for that, and the discussion came up about alcohol in parks in general. We brought this draft ordinance to the Park Board for the review at January's meeting, and it was approved to recommend the draft ordinance as you see it in your packet to present to the council. Couple comments with that. We had some further discussions with City Attorney Langle. So a couple quick clarifications in here. The intoxicating liquor is not technically defined by state statute. So he would recommend, if the council wants to move this forward, that one revision is made, that all the terms of intoxicating liquor is changed to alcoholic beverage, to make that a little bit more stronger and explicit. The other part of this discussion was in there, it lists the area within the park that the liquor is going to be sold or consumed has to be within a contained area, a fenced-in area or building, and that it is prohibited outside of that approved area. We did some clarification if this is something that is required by state statute, because there was discussion of whether that needed to be as part of that. So there's, as far as we can tell, no statute that requires you to have a fenced-in area or a contained area. The licensee, the liquor licensee, is responsible for the area that they are serving. So if they don't have a fenced-in area, they have to somehow manage that as part of their license. So if there's underage consumption, that falls on the licensee and their responsibility. So I just wanted to clarify those 2 pieces. Other than that, I'd just like to go back to the recommend motion. So right now we're recommending to conduct the first reading of the proposed ordinance 1545. This would amend section 1315, or no, I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. Be 1200, section 1200, regarding consumption of liquor in parks. The vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous, and then we would request to call a public hearing at the February 21st council meeting.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Any questions of staff on this ordinance, Chairman Johnson?
Yeah, based on my reading, this just sets forth that a club or organization could obtain a license to sell booze in the parks. But like in the case of, say, a softball team that uses the park as their third place and they want to bring a case of beer, we're still not allowing that. That we will be citing this summer. We will be going into the softball fields and writing tickets.
That is
Question?
that is an enforcement issue, yep.
No, are we putting together a plan to enforce that since we're not adding it as an allowed use in the parks?
That's something we can work with PD on making sure we look at through the summer, yep.
Okay, so we're going to start citing softball players for drinking beer. Okay, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should have probably had something in the code about separating adult activities or youth activities or something like that. But if we want to throw softball players in prison, I guess we'll have to do that. Also, I have the same question regarding the campground, too. We don't have any provision here of if you're camping, you're allowed a little nightcap in your camper at Lum Park, right? But if this is the only change we're making, there's a lot of uses that we're missing out on, is what I'm gonna say.
Can I ask a question, Mr. President? Or should I wait?
Yeah, I want you to hang on 1 second, would you, please? So, because I want to comment, not on this specific ordinance, but on what Mr. Johnson just did. And I think this is a good idea. Before we hold the first reading, I believe staff and the public might be interested in some of our ideas. You bring up a great point in that there's a whole other set of potential users, recreational users, softball players, but there might be others, right? There might be a wedding or something. There's lots of weddings in Gregory Park. And I think having this discussion prior to the first reading is a good idea. Because if there's any changes that we want to make prior to the second reading where we have the public hearing, this is an excellent opportunity and great what you just started. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure staff does too. So Carrie, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to talk a little about the process of what I see as a benefit to trying to make this and other ordinances the best we can. So, Kara, you're up.
Well, I don't know that my comments are now appropriate or my questions, but in section 1205, the non-intoxicating malt liquor, it does talk about allowing vendors at Memorial Park to sell 3-2, but, so softball players are allowed to purchase alcohol, is that correct?
That is correct.
At Memorial Park?
At Memorial Park
Through
for
that
the adult
vendor?
softball.
Not allowed to walk in with a case of beer.
Okay, got it. So, moving this forward, I will not support the opportunity to have alcohol at all parks. I am happy to revisit section 1205, section 815, the applicable sections of the city code to figure out some of the details, like around 3-2, and, I mean, is that even a thing anymore? I don't know. But I will not support moving forward with permits in all parks for alcohol consumption.
Thank you. Again, procedurally, we can hold a first reading and make changes. The attorney is not here and he's not available online, but he is on his way here. And I think there are some rules regarding making ordinances more or less restrictive between readings that can be followed to change things and not stop the process, which requires a whole nother set of notifications, et cetera. So
Mr.
if we can, yeah, yes, Mr. Chesak?
I just have a quick question I think can be answered. Can you tell me the number of park board members that recommended this of those? I mean, how many were in attendance and what was the vote? Is that possible to, anybody know that?
I do know that. It was actually unanimous.
And how many members were there? Full?
I believe full board was there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no objection, our attorney just rolled in, and I would like to put him on the spot, if you can. We're discussing the alcohol ordinance, and the question is, if we change the ordinance, we haven't held the first reading yet. Okay, so we're just discussing some things that might benefit this ordinance or make it better. What are the rules between first readings and second readings of things we can and can't change regarding public notification?
Well, Mr. President, Council, there are no rules per se. My opinion is that when you get to non-zoning ordinances, that you can modify things between the first and second reading. Ideally, you would modify them before the first reading, have your discussion, make your changes, and then do the reading based on those changes. But I don't think there's anything that stops you from making modifications between the first and the second reading. The reason I distinguish zoning ordinances is because they've gone through the planning commission. And by code, the planning commission holds the hearing. And so the public had their opportunity to have input on that version. So to change it after the public hearing, I think is potentially problematic. Because unless you go back and have another public hearing or something like that, to give the public the opportunity to comment on the version that's moving forward. But here, in a non-zoning ordinance like this, that you're enacting under your police power, first of all, there is no public hearing required. You can have one, but it's not required. But there's an opportunity for public input if you want at this stage and again at the second reading. So I think that procedural aspect is still there, even if you make a change now after the first reading. But like I said, ideally, if you have some things in mind, it would be done prior to the first reading. Just work the language in now.
Okay. I've got Mr. O'Day and then Mr. Johnson. Mr. O'Day?
Yeah. So I think this is kind of hitting half the issues. It's the sale of alcohol, but there's going to be a lot of people that want to have events where they're not selling it. So like we mentioned, weddings, softball. They're not just buying it at the concession stand, they're bringing it in. Okay. So I think you need to delineate two separate ideas in the ordinance. So I don't think this ordinance is crafted in full yet. So I think we should send it back, in my opinion. Also, I noticed in number 4, underneath subdivision 2B, number 4, the license must be reviewed and approved by the Commissioner of Public Safety before it is deemed in effect. Who's that?
That's standard operating procedure. State signs off on liquor license.
That'd be
Okay,
the state of
okay.
Minnesota.
Okay. But yeah, I remember as a kid, the fireman's picnic. My dad was a volunteer firefighter. And I'm pretty sure our entire fire department would be drinking beer in either Lum Park, Bain Park, or whatever park we were at. And I don't think that we should discriminate on which parks get to have fun or not fun, as long as it's, to an extent. I think we've discussed that we don't want giant ragers at our parks. Unless there's a big concert going on or something like that. That might be fun too. But it needs to be, I think we're halfway through the discussion, and I think there's some missing parts that are going to be mismanaged if we don't hit on all those.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I already spoke. I have nothing more to offer. I was just going to recap to Joe, but I like where this is headed. I've got nothing else to say.
Okay. Mayor Bedell?
So at the park board, the conversation surrounded mostly how do you create a process? What is the process for someone wanting to introduce this? I agree that I think that we absolutely need to come up with a solution for softball players. What is the solution for that? Because are we allowing it? Are we not allowing it? Are we just going to allow it and pretend it's not happening? There has to be something that is taken care of on that end of things. From the park board side of things, most of the conversation surrounded about how one, it would be licensed, so we need to have someone with a liquor license, i.e. a club or something along those lines. They would be going through the event application, so applying for an application that we already have, that process, and that stuff would then define where things are restricted in terms of how or who is operating this. The question did come about in terms of penning it in. Are we penning and creating boundaries for the usage? And from the park board's perspective, those boundaries become the park. itself. So if you create an event and you, in your application say we're going to allow alcohol consumption in Gregory Park, and here's our plan for consumption in Gregory Park, they're then going through the process and creating an application for that. If that group wanted to come forth and say, we're gonna pen this in and have it be in this section of Gregory Park, they could do that as a part of their application process. But from the park board side of things, what they were looking to do was create the process. How do we then review that process so it's not just a free-for-all? And then how do we delineate what is and is not an acceptable use? But we have that, we already do that for most things. We're just now adding alcohol to those parameters that they're already going through.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Kara, go on, Terry.
So I get the whole having fun to Commissioner O'Day's comments. My dad was also a volunteer firefighter, and the firemen's picnics were a blast. I didn't drink because I was little, but they were a really good time. And I believe that really good times can happen without the use of alcohol. Many of the constituents, both in my ward and outside of my ward, residents near Gregory Park, for example, expressed their concerns for allowing alcohol in additional parks besides Memorial Park, and wanting a family-friendly environment in which to partake in activities and not have to worry about alcohol and behaviors of persons in the park who might be consuming alcohol, and I respect that. Not that you guys don't, I'm not saying that at all. This is just my opinion on my interactions with others. One constituent also said we spend a lot of money on our parks to make them family-friendly and try and provide family-friendly opportunities within our parks, and that can be done without the use of alcohol. I'm done.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I'll just clear up my comment.
You can.
So just to make it clear, I think what we want to do moving forward with it is just make it event-based, and then you need to delineate whether or not it's sale or not for sale. So I think you have to have two separate rules for that. And whether the park board decides that they want certain parks or not, I guess that would be up for discussion. I think they already decided that. But if it's event-based, then I think you're still family-friendly, in my opinion, because you can have a start time and an end time to an event. And if the police are aware that the event is going on, which they would be because there's an application process for that event, then it's easier to patrol, it's easier to manage. And I think it just allows for more use in our parks.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Chesak.
when we talk about for sale or not for sale, that's kind of the same as what's allowed for consumption and what isn't. I guess if you're going to, there's a difference there too, because if you, I think with some of the areas that we're allowing, or we don't allow it, but it's happening, I think is some of the softball stuff, and it goes back a long way with me. It was always beer drinking. I guess if we're gonna, like Chairman O'Day says, delineate the two, sale and not sale, we have to make sure that, you know, if you're gonna allow the sale, you're obviously allowing consumption. So I just wanna make sure we understand that, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So here's my question. We've got a first reading scheduled for tonight and a second reading scheduled for 2 weeks. If you think we can move forward, then we should hold the first reading tonight, but give staff as much direction as we can to come back with the second reading as close to what we want as possible. If you think we're too far away, then we shouldn't hold that. Hold on. So if we're going to hold the first reading, and you heard Mr. Langle say it's best to have as much of the corrections that you want before we hold the first reading, then we're going to go through that process right now. Okay, some of the questions you guys have asked are gonna, and then we're gonna hold the first reading, see what we can do. Okay? So, procedurally, Mr. Johnson, what do you think? You had your hand up?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess somebody else could make the motion and I'll just,
Well, I'm not looking for a motion.
oh,
All right, now, I'm looking for your opinion as to whether
My
we should
opinion-
try and get this thing hammered out this evening, or whether we should scrap it and start over.
okay, so my opinion would be the latter, that we're really far away from where I would like to see this ordinance when we finally vote on it, where we're delineating softball and camping and other uses, that I don't think we're ready to just add those tonight. I think we should send it back and look at it again in a couple of weeks.
Okay? Anybody disagree with Mr. Johnson?
I agree.
Mr. President,
Yes?
I'd move to table this until the 21st.
You know, we don't have a motion to table, Jeff, so I don't think we need it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna call on a point of order that at this point, we do not have a motion to table and a second. I think we can put it off without just not hold the first reading, okay?
That's fine.
All right, and that's why I'm asking your opinion as to whether you agree with Mr. Johnson. I've heard agree from Mr. Stunek that we're just too far away. If somebody disagrees, then we can make a motion, but I would prefer that we give staffs a whole bunch of direction on what that second reading should be. Tiffany Stingline.
I have a question. The park board, I guess I'd like them to weigh in after getting the feedback that we have given tonight. So I'm wondering what their schedule looks like.
We have the liaison here, and he's raising his hand.
Yeah,
So, but I want to give you the floor,
They
since
meet
you
like
have
every
the
week.
floor. Is that all you have?
That's all I had.
Okay.
So the park board has a meeting coming up that they could look at it again. I don't necessarily think that they need to. I think the direction that was given to the park board was the council is interested in hearing what you think. Bring forth what you think, and then the council is going to take a look at it. I don't necessarily think that it needs to get drugged back down into the weeds. However, there's no reason not to put it back onto one of their agendas. In the meantime, they can take a look, they can chime in. It wouldn't affect their scheduling at all. They would not need a special meeting for that. But I don't think that they necessarily need to dive back into the weeds. They've had multiple discussions on it. They've put forth kind of what they think. Interesting conversations happening about specifics in terms of softball and the camping specifically, I think is the most important one. Because, come on, are we going and policing campfires? Are we gonna go,
It's
knock-
hard.
are we gonna go knock beverages out of people's hands? Let's just create a policy. So I don't think that that's a bad idea. But Jesse, correct me if I'm incorrect. Correct me if I'm incorrect. We do have a meeting very quickly, I believe next Tuesday.
We have one tomorrow, and then
Tomorrow,
there's,
my
I think,
God,
then
where am I gonna be?
we have meetings pretty much the next 3 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, so we could easily put this in front of them.
Okay. Oh, but you haven't made a motion to refer this back to the park board, have you?
I have not. We don't have a motion on the floor to.
We don't
refer to
have a
them.
motion on the floor.
I would move to refer this back to the park board, Mr. President.
Oh, gosh. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Let them deal with it.
Is there a second? Thankfully, this motion dies for lack of second. I think the park board, Mr. Chesak, has given us what their direction is. It's now our job to hammer out the details, to send it back, to ask, should there be a fenced-in area? Should there be specific parts? I think that's the responsibility of the council. The park board has issued its recommendation that alcohol should be allowed in the park. Now it's our job to finish it out. Now, Mr. Yeager's here, and he's kind of lifted out of his chair. He might have something to say. And I'm gonna give him a chance, because everybody's had something to say. And then we'll go to Mr. Stunek. Mr. Yeager, please give us your name and address.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin Yeager, 325 Bluff Avenue. I'm a member of the Park Board. Our conversation went very much like your conversation just went. We generally had a global conversation about, do we support use of alcohol in our parks for events? That was kind of how it was brought to us, and we had a conversation very much like this. We very also quickly realized we got into the weeds really quickly. camping, the softball. For the record, alcohol is used in our parks almost every day all summer. And so that leads into a greater question about enforcement. And anytime we talk about enforcement, we're talking about how is the ordinance crafted to allow those who enforce to enforce in such a way that doesn't create bigger problems. So the park board took a basic stance that we support it if it's attached to an organizer and can be done in a safe manner, and then hoped that those who write ordinance could help us get this much further along. The park board doesn't really show up to write ordinance, so clearly we need help and direction on that. I'd be happy, I think the park board would be happy to have it come back to us if there were specific questions. Do you support this? How do you want this? What do you want this? But I don't think the park board necessarily has the tools to help craft this ordinance. So that's all.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask if anybody has questions? while you're
Absolutely
standing
not.
here?
Happy to help.
Anybody have questions of Kevin from the park board? Mr. Johnson?
Where'd you get that jacket?
I'll talk,
Anybody have a pertinent question? Mr. Stunek?
I don't have any questions for Kevin, no.
All right.
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
Oh, yes, Karen?
So help me understand something, if you would, if you guys had I know you had in-depth conversation. So the park board is saying, if we have an ordinance, first, alcohol in the parks is already occurring, right?
Yes.
And we don't necessarily, the police department doesn't necessarily have specific authorization to hold those folks accountable or something, right? Is that, there's
I
limited,
don't think Kevin can answer the
there's limited.
legal questions.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at the chief.
But you're
My apologies,
addressing
Mr.
Mr. Yeager.
My apologies.
Mr. Yeager's held up here, so he can be answered.
I will continue talking with him.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you had ample conversation around it's already occurring, and the park board believes that if there is this policy or whatever you call it in place that will center it around a permit with an organizer, that drinking then will either go away or be enforceable for those who are not a part of the permit. Is that?
I think that the assumption, really the question that was posed to us is, would we accept, or how did we feel about large events being an event that has alcohol use that's usable in our parks? We currently allow smoking in our parks. We have rules about how close you can smoke to playgrounds, believe it or not, and those types of things. So we feel like we want as many people to enjoy our parks under a lot of different scenarios, as long as it can be done safely and responsibly, period.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Mr. President.
Hold on, Jeff.
No.
Anything else? Okay. Any questions for Park Commissioner Yeager? Mr. Chesak?
Yes, Mr. Yeager, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
When you discussed this and you talked about having an organizer or a vendor, was there a thought that if you allow permanent vendors to provide alcohol at the parks, that would then prohibit perhaps softball players then at the same park, or on the sidewalk at the park, or from bringing their own beer?
No, Mr. Chesak. I would say that a more accurate account of the conversation is that the idea behind an organizer is that somebody was accountable for the use that was happening at the parks during that event. There was somebody who filled out an application, there was a line, there was a name on a line. This is the person who we said could bring alcohol into our parks and then control it in that domain. That was the reasoning. And then we got off into softball and firemen and all the other stuff.
If there was something such as that, would there be some sort of control over people then bringing their own while there's a vendor distributing it at that particular function?
And that's basically the exact direction that our conversation took, in which we started talking about softball. We started talking about people who bring in alcohol on their own, and then enforcement. And as you guys have found, we found the same thing. This is a pretty big monster to figure out and correctly write and enforce. So.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Is there any other questions for Park Commissioner Yeager? Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep,
Appreciate
thank you.
your testimony. Okay. I'm gonna, since it doesn't appear, but I'm gonna ask again so we can wrap this up. Is there anybody who wishes to make a motion on the first reading, which is scheduled? Okay? I don't hear any. No, that doesn't mean it's dead. Did you wish to make a motion?
No, I'm not making a motion.
Then I'm gonna have you hold off on your comments for a minute. We've had a lot of comments, a lot. So, and you'll get a chance, but I wanna get the motion thing wrapped up and where we go from here, okay? So, there's obviously a lot of issues. And it doesn't appear we're looking, that we have anybody wishing to make a motion. So the next question is, Mr. Chesak suggested that we go back to the park board, but this board has chosen not to do that, and I don't think we should. But can this be done from the council during a council meeting? Or is this something you guys would like to see a workshop on to try and hammer out? That's, I see as one of two things. Either we all put in our ideas and our staff tries to craft some sort of ordinance to take them all into account or as much as possible, although I'm sure some will contradict each other, or do we want to try to hammer this out ourselves in a workshop? Okay. After that, I don't think we need to discuss this on end this evening. If we're not going to move forward with it, we can discuss it all day long for the rest of our lives. So, if you have a what next comment, I would prefer to hear that. Yes, sir?
We have a workshop coming up with the park board on the 7th. I think we could discuss it there.
I like that idea.
Crazy.
Mr. Stunek, you had a comment?
A lot of our stuff is complaint driven. Unless, I mean, I'm not a police officer, obviously, but I would like to know, has there been a lot of complaints in the parks about alcohol and police respond and deal with it? I'm not aware there has been. Maybe some, but not a lot.
Yes, not an overwhelming amount of complaints,
Okay.
no.
So that answers that question. The second question I have, we've always been, since I've been on the council, always listened to our committees on what they recommend. And I've heard unanimously from the park board, this is what they're recommending. And I'm not against what Chairman O'Day said, sending it back to their workshop, but I'm just saying, we typically have always gone with what the committees have recommended to us as a council. There are a lot of questions here tonight, but I don't have a problem with Mr. O'Day sending it back to their workshop either.
Well, we would be part of that. It's a joint workshop.
Yeah.
Okay. I see two choices. One is we add it to the agenda on the 27th with the joint workshop with the park board, or we continue to try and hammer this out ourselves. If you feel it should go to the workshop, please make a motion now.
So moved,
Suggesting
Johnson.
that get added to the
Second.
agenda. Motion by Johnson, second by Chesak. This is to put this on the agenda on the 27th with the joint workshop with the park board, correct, Mr. Johnson?
Correct.
All right, any discussion on that motion alone? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. I believe we have discussed this one. We can take the second reading off for 2 weeks, I think, safely. Okay, we're gonna do this 4 more times. Next up is 8B, the first reading of proposed ordinance 1543, amending section 900.08 of the city code, the harboring of chickens and ducks. I believe this is Mr. Kramvik. Anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So at the January 17th City Council meeting, Council directed staff to draft an ordinance that allows for the harboring of 4 chickens or ducks per property. Further, that this number would not count towards the allowable number of dogs and cats per property. So currently, section 900.08 allows for a total of any combination of 4 dogs, cats, or chickens. So with this, staff did essentially amend the ordinance to include chickens or ducks in many of the sentence or paragraphs. Staff also did add a definition to the term duck. There's definitions for chicken in the ordinance as well. So staff's interpretation of this would be any variety of domesticated duck that is raised for egg laying. Staff also recommends within this ordinance that the coop and run shall meet all accessory structure setbacks instead of principal structure setbacks. We did find this to be problematic, meeting the rear yard setback of principal structures when somebody would come in potentially to construct a coop or run. Really in our lots that are kind of tighter and smaller, principal accessory structure setbacks and accessory structures have the same side yard setbacks. It's really that rear yard setback that's an issue. This code, as written and presented to City Council, still all coops and runs have to be located 25 feet from any other premises on adjacent properties, and it does still require neighboring consent. So with that, I can certainly answer any questions, but staff's recommendation is to motion to hold the first reading of proposed ordinance number 1543, and note a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous.
Any questions of Mr. Kramvik?
Yes, President.
Chazak?
Mr. Kramvik, when a property owner gives permission and that then neighbor puts, chicken run in, if a person were to move in subsequent, like the neighbor moves that gave permission, is that new neighbor able to speak up and say he doesn't like chickens and?
They are. It is a yearly permit.
Oh, it is. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Kramvik on the ordinance? Okay. Any comments by the council as to the content of the ordinance? Hearing none?
I will comment.
Yes, Mr. O'Day.
I'm going to comment that I don't like the ordinance requiring neighborly consent. I think as we're complaint-based with everything else, we could be complaint-based with chickens and ducks. If we're complaint-based already with dogs and cats, then why can't we be that same way with chickens, which are probably much less of a nuisance than a dog can be. So I'm gonna vote no, just based on that. If you got rid of that, I would vote yes tonight.
Thank you. Any further comments on the ordinance? Mr. Johnson?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Since this is the first reading, can we remove those two sentences right now?
Absolutely, we can.
Okay.
I would motion to move forward without those two sentences we just spoke of.
Second.
We have a motion by O'Day, a second by Stunek to remove the lines regarding neighborly consent. Any comments on the amendment, Mr. Johnson?
Well, I just comment on the motion at all for the motion overall of
Yep.
dispensing with the first reading and this motion. I just want to thank, again,
We actually
staff.
don't have a motion yet.
He made a motion to,
Just to amend it.
just to amend it? Oh, well,
We're really
I'll vote for
only
the motion. It's a good.
I motion to move forward with that amendment.
You can't make another motion. You have a
I
motion.
already did that.
You did, and I'm getting Mr. Johnson back on track. We're discussing the amendment which removes the neighbor's consent. Any further discussion on that?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Chesak?
He said there was two items. I know the neighbor's consent, and just refresh me of the two, what's the other one? Was there two things?
Two sentences.
Two sentences. I'm sorry. Got it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Just a quick question. We've obviously had people apply for chicken coops. Is it an issue getting neighbor consent for chicken coops? Do we see that often?
So far it's been 2 applications. With those 2, it hasn't been an issue, but I don't know what the future holds for that.
Oddly enough, I find myself agreeing with Mike. I'd like to see us have, if you got 4 dogs, I'd like to sign off on that. That's what I'd like to sign off. My neighbor having 4 dogs would be more of a concern to me. But I do agree. I think we can control this on the back end as well, especially if it's yearly.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, and I'll vote against the amendment. I think it's still a good idea. It's the neighborly thing to do, to ask, hey, do you mind if I have chickens? Hearing no further discussion, the motion is on the amendment to remove the neighborly consent. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. That motion carries. Back to the amended motion. Any comments on that? Then we're looking, if not, we're looking for a motion to hold the first reading, which must pass unanimously. And I will vote for it.
So move, Johnson.
Second.
We have a motion by Johnson, second by Stengline. Any discussion? Mr. Mayor.
I just wanted clarification, now that I've spoken in favor of not asking your neighbor, well, let's say you do have it for a year and then your neighbor comes and complains, what is the process for that?
It may be revoked or suspended for any violation of this.
Well,
But that's not part of the motion, the ordinance.
but that's not, neighbor complaining is not a violation.
God, we're talking about ducks.
Any staff member be able to answer that on ordinance enforcement?
Yep, so it would go under our code enforcement issues, warning, violation letters, citation processes. There's, I believe, language in there to keep things orderly, healthy for the chickens. You're not, or ducks, you're not harboring them in unkept locations or unkept coops and runs in there. So there are certain things if there are issues with the property. Obviously, if there's roosters kept on the property that would make noise, that's part of our ordinance. You're not allowed to do that. And it would go through the same code enforcement process that we have for other instances.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
I just have one follow-up. If we
Yeah,
do,
Mr. Mayor,
if
yeah.
we do move forward with this, I would like to see us revisit this in a year and just make sure that it hasn't created a huge ruckus.
Did you ever hand up, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, Mr. President, I just want to thank the council and staff for working on this and keeping Brainerd on the front lines of the fight during the egg apocalypse.
Well, thank you for that. Mr. O'Day.
In addition to James's comments, I think that this would fall under the jurisdiction of like a health and safety hazard if it did come to SPW through a complaint, and or the noise ordinance. So I think there are protections for neighbors who find themselves with unruly chickens for neighbors.
You know, we got 5 more of these to go.
I know.
We can
This is
take
fun.
as
Let's keep
long as we
rolling.
want on this one. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. The motion is to hold the first reading of the proposed ordinance 1543, which has been an ordinance amending section 900.08 of the city code concerning the harboring of chickens and ducks as amended. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries unanimously. We only got a few more to go.
The next one's about fish.
Next one. Thank you.
be able to
Next
raise
up is item 8C, proposed ordinance 1544, amending section 2014.05 of the city code, the use of outdoor power equipment. Mr. Kramvik, anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So this past year, staff has received complaints from 2 residents near businesses and institutions about snow plowing hours regarding the noise of power equipment as well as plowing. Staff has also received complaints from the businesses and institutions in that area and snow plowing companies regarding the need to remove snow before business hours and opening of the buildings. So as a reminder, with this ordinance, snow plows on motor vehicles are not regulated by section 2014 and are able to operate at all hours as long as they comply with the motor vehicle section of the noise ordinance. So with that, power equipment for sidewalk snow removal, such as snow blowers, backpack blowers, skid steers, and maintenance tractor attachments are enforceable currently by section 2014. Just as a note, skid steers and tractors for plowing purposes in parking lots would also be regulated by the section because they're technically not a motor vehicle. So proposed ordinance number 1544, as drafted, would exempt power equipment for the purposes of snow removal from ordinance 2014.05. The ordinance currently states that power equipment cannot run between the hours of 6:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on public holidays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Certainly can answer any questions of council. Staff's recommendation is a motion to hold the first reading of proposed ordinance number 1544. Note, a vote to dispense with the actual reading of the ordinance must be unanimous.
So move, Johnson.
Second.
No discussion here, huh? Well, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there a comment on the motion?
Of course he
Not
does.
seeing any. Any at all? Not even the mayor? Oh, there you are.
If I may,
You may.
the last time we spoke with this, I was a little theatrical about my distaste for this. Maybe being a little facetious, but at the same time, I do think that we should be accommodating to reasonable requests. I like everything that's here, although I do think it is a reasonable request from homeowners that backpack blowers before 5 a.m. seems a bit excessive. Everything else seems great to me. Let's get the snow out of there. But I do think it is a reasonable request that people aren't walking around with Ghostbuster backpacks blowing snow around before 5 a.m. So I know that it was unanimous against the mayor's disapproval. However, I'm just going to set that out there and ask that that is a reasonable request.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. President,
Mr. Chesak?
I always find it interesting, the people who get left behind on an ordinance like this are those who work nights and come home and it's 7 in the morning and they want to hit their slumber and there's the machines running. And they don't have any say when we keep to the ordinance we have right now. So I'm in favor of this.
Okay. Any
Time
further
workers don't
discussion?
have a say.
Oh,
Yeah, so,
I'm
sorry
sorry.
about that.
anything else, Mr. Chesak?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the ordinance? Seeing none, all in favor say, this is the first reading. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next up, item 8D, first reading for proposed ordinance 1545, amending section 1315 of the city code parking restrictions during snow emergencies. Public Works Director Dean, anything you'd like to add to what's in our packet?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Just to clarify, so we've had some requests to look at these areas, specifically west of the river, but that became a review of kind of all of these areas where all of the streets fall within that day one of a snow emergency. Again, everything west of Mississippi, south of Wright Street, all of those routes are a day one, no parking restriction. So if you live on those streets and you have to park on street, this creates quite a burden for those residents over there. So we're bringing this ordinance to revise that portion of the city code to treat those areas similar to the way we treat all of the remaining routes throughout town, where general north-south routes would be a day one restriction, and general east-west routes would be a day two restriction. We wouldn't propose any changes to snow emergency or downtown district routes. So at this time, we're recommending a motion to conduct the first reading of the proposed ordinance, and then we actually have to renumber it to 1546. So with proposed ordinance 1546, this ordinance would amend section 1315.03 of the city code, and a vote to dispense with the actual reading must be unanimous, and we are requesting to hold a public hearing at the February 21st council meeting.
Thank you. Any questions of staff on this proposed ordinance? First reading. Any questions of staff? Any comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to hold the first reading on proposed ordinance 1545, an ordinance amending section 1315.03 of the city code, snow emergencies?
So moved.
Motion by O'Day,
Second.
is there a second? Second by Chesak. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none? Oh, Mr. Johnson.
I'm not going to vote no because I don't want to hear anybody read this to me, but I don't support it. I don't think it's necessary. I think we amended this just a few years ago and it's worked out really quite well. And I think we should just leave it as is. So I don't support making this change to our ordinances.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
As Gabe spoke, I believe I was a part of SPW when this went through the first time, and one of the concerns we had with it was making sure that our streets are getting plowed in one day if at all possible. And so we spoke for quite a distance of time about making sure that that's the case. I know that it's not a part of the ordinance, but I do believe that it is good city policy that we are trying to plow all of our streets day one. This does make me a little nervous that we are creating a day one, day two across the entire board. And I want to make sure that that doesn't just become the norm, that we are just accepting that we're just got 2 different days that we plow. One of the main things we should be trying to do is plow every street day one, if at all possible.
Any further discussion? Mr. O'Day?
I can say, I think this was originally maybe an SPW item, so we spoke about this in our meeting. And I wasn't comfortable at first with it either, but I was assured by our Public Works Director that we do in fact hit, most snowfalls, we hit every road in town, all 80 miles of streets. I'm not sure if we get to all the alleys on day one usually, but this is about where the cars are able to park. And I think, I don't know if we need to add that specific language into it, but that could be a way to settle any concern.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. We have a motion, we have a second to hold the first reading. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. All right, next up is public forum. Time allocated for citizens to bring matters that are not on today's agenda to the attention of the public. Time limits may be imposed. If you're here to speak in the public forum, please come on up and state your name and address. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for waiting.
Thanks for waiting, and let us know what you've got.
So my name is Cheyenne Miles, 1120 South 8th Street, and I recently purchased property on 121 Washington Street Northeast and opened CC's Bar in 2021. I was recently offered the opportunity to lease the next door property. There used to be the old Esser's Liquor Store. And my hope is to open an event center, reasonably priced wedding venue. But the issue I'm running into is I've gotten mixed comments on whether my liquor license would be able to transfer to that adjoining property given it's under a different address. So I'm approaching the council with that question. If I follow all the regulations with the fire door and an adjoining door to my current property, if my liquor license will be able to transfer over.
I have good news and bad news.
What do you got for
You
me?
didn't have to wait.
Okay,
We have staff that'll answer that for you all day. Just come by during the day.
okay,
It's a great question.
okay.
Really excited for you.
Well,
But
thank
no,
you.
I don't think any of us can answer that, but we.
See, and I've actually gone and talked, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I
Yeah, no,
did
that's
talk
all right.
to a couple staff members, and like I said, I got mixed answers, so we just thought if we approached the council, we would get a direct answer. That was my,
Well,
we gotta know. with the
Yep,
last time
you
we
gotta
went.
know. Okay. I got something else for you.
All right.
Tomorrow, you come here and you ask. If you don't get a direct answer, you see this young lady right here.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I'll be seeing her tomorrow.
Okay? She might not be able to answer it, but she'll help,
All right.
okay?
Thank you for your time.
You bet. Thanks for hanging on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll see you
Anything
tomorrow.
else you'd like to add?
Nothing.
Okay, super excited to see that go if it goes, huh?
Well, thank you.
All right. Anybody else wishing to speak at public forum? Anybody, I see nobody online. I didn't officially open it, but if the record could show, we opened it at 8:46 and closed the public forum at 8:49. We will now move on to staff reports. We'll start over to my left with HR Director Schubert.
Nothing to add in addition to my report.
Thank you.
Nothing here, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krambeck.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So just wanted to make City Council aware of the next Planning Commission meeting. We have applications for a rezoning, basically couple vacant parcels. They'd like to do a lot consolidation, but they have to have consistent zoning districts on there, so that's the one application. Also, they received an application for a final plat for My Neighbor to Love Coalition, so that'll be going to the next Planning Commission meeting, as well as we did get an application for a conditional use permit for a storage facility on Delwood Drive, so that'll be at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Mr. Dean, anything from Public Works?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. So just to clarify, the guys are still out there moving snow and getting snow out of wherever routes that we're able to get to. Just recently, they got the service drive next to South 6th. We'll be attacking College Drive tomorrow. The plan is to get the area by Northwest 4th, that really narrowed corridor with the median there. We'll have to do a little bit of a closure on Wednesday, but we'll try and get that little stretch cleared, as well as Pine Street, and we'll just continue to work through town as the weather allows us to continue to knock down those boulevards, open up curbs, and widen the streets that we can get widened out.
Thank you. Finance Director Hillman? IT Director Strong?
Nothing.
For the Police Department? Nothing. All right, and we'll end up right next door. City Administrator Bergman?
Nothing to add that is not in my report.
Excellent. Mr. Mayor?
Just two items. Continue up with Jesse's conversation about snow. I just want to say thank you to our snow removing employees doing a fantastic job. We had some people giving us a lot of thanks for the removal of the snow around the schools. I want to thank Councilman Johnson for pushing forward with that. Just a quick request and more of a comment to the public that just want to make sure we're working as best we can with the school district and their employees. Got a phone call from Reed Tesey over there, buildings guy, and just said, let's just make sure the conversations are happening so they're aware when we're doing it, we're aware, we try to find a good day for everybody. I think we're doing a great job of that. Thank you, Jesse, on that. One last comment. March 11th, it's coming up. Get your green ready. It is St. Patrick's Day celebration in the beautiful downtown city of Brainerd. 1 p.m. parade. I would like to see somebody in this room, I don't care who, get me a float. Let's go. Police? Kevin Yeager, Kevin Stunek?
What do you want?
Throwing energized float, I'm sure.
Let's get you going. We got new faces here. Jeff, we'll get you going. We'll get you on a float. But just if you're interested, great event for the family. I think in the last couple of years, the focus with the Brainerd St. Patrick's Day parade and events, has been to turn it more to a family thing for our local families, so you don't got to travel out of the area. Just come on out, have a good time. It's very weather dependent. We know that about March 11th, but it's going to be beautiful this year. We're going to get all dressed up and have a good time. So just a reminder, St. Patrick's Day celebration on the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chesak?
Mr. President, I would respectfully request that since I've gone first as a council member at every meeting this year, could you start on the other end, please?
No. Ms. Stengline?
Well, I had my first meeting with the Planning Commission, and that went fairly well. The zoning code no longer thumps when you drop it on the table. It's too light.
Oh, my.
Thank you, Mr. O'Day.
I have nothing to add tonight, thank you.
Mr. Stunek?
Absolutely nothing.
Ms. Terry?
I attended my first Brainerd Public Library Board. It was quite interesting. I recommend that folks follow their Facebook page to watch for upcoming events. I also attended the Northland Arboretum Board as the liaison, and I just want to draw your attention to an event coming up on this Thursday from 5 to 7 at Bayadella. Happy hour for a cause to help fund the Arboretum.
Mr. Johnson?
Two things. We have met with the Economic Development Authority and we elected new leadership. I chaired that last year. I no longer have to do that because thank you to Commissioner Yeager for stepping up to chair the EDA. And after having to chair the HRA for 2 years, we finally found somebody willing to step up. And I want to thank Rebecca Kent Elbrock for stepping up to chair the Housing and Redevelopment Authority Committee. That's all I have.
Thank you, and I have nothing to add. We are looking for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President?
We have a motion by Stunek. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr.
By
President?
O'Day. We have a motion and a second. There's no discussion on the motion to
Did anybody say
adjourn. All
later
in
than
favor,
8:40?
say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We are adjourned.
Connie wins again?